Marshall, O Marshall, how I love thee, let me count thy ways. Thou art smart and funny, sweet and kind, witty and conscientious, and yet thou art burdened with the most selfish of wives and the most pig-headed of best friends, O Marshall. My dear sweet Marshall, thou deservest so much better than this. I'm so sorry, y'all. I just finished How I Met Your Mother Season 3, Episode 6, titled I'm Not That Guy. And whilst I was entertained at the idea of poor Ted having his name star in the most R-rated of flicks as a sign of hero worship from the kid he had saved when they were younger, a large part of my attention was instead focused on Marshall and how truly selfish the people he loves are being towards him. A fact that I'd already suspected from earlier in the show when Lily was trying out a wedding dress, which was then compounded in season 3, episode 5, with Ted's too much tongue and big mouth ass, and Lily's I'm gonna saddle the man I love with my debt ass, just had me screaming at my TV, and I knew I had to make this video because if this is your first time finding my channel or stumbling on one of my videos, hello, I'm Noria, and I'm currently in the middle of my first time ever watch of How I Met Your Mother. And the entire basis of this series of videos, this How I Met Your Mother playlist on my channel, is to have you all watch me in real time, bond with these characters, criticize or praise them, predict what I think would happen with them in future seasons, only to either fall flat on my face at having guessed wrong or be vindicated in my predictions. And because I do enjoy the blind watch and reaction, I always make sure to ask that please don't spoil the upcoming seasons for me. A large portion of you have been able to not spoil anything for me so far, and for that I am infinitely grateful. May your sheets always be warm on cold nights. May you always find loose change in pockets you never expected them to turn up in. May your favorite artist always have the city you're residing in as one of their stops on their tour, with ticket prices that come at a steal. Like, for real. Thank you. For those of you who just cannot resist, please do better. I don't want to curse you with constantly stepping into dog poop every time you leave your house or apartment, because that would be rough. But yeah, for those tracking, I'm all caught up to season 3, episode 6. If at any point you want to leave a comment and chat with others in the comment section, because I know that a lot of you have already seen the show and would like to just chat generally about these characters or my observations, remember to give me a heads up warning of spoilers ahead and then leave a bunch of asterisks so I have to click on that to read more, which I'm not going to do, of course, because I'm avoiding the spoilers. But those who are not me and would love to read your comments can easily do so. And this still applies if you're responding to someone else's comments, by the way. If you want to say something spoilery in response to something someone else has said before, please don't forget to use the warning and asterisk. Thank you. Because some of you did not keep that in mind in the last video. And with that said, I happen to believe that so far, what I've seen of the show point out to Marshall being the most decent of the entire lot of the McLaren's 5. And the events of episode 5 and 6 kind of confirmed that for me. Of course, before I get into the synopsis of the episodes, timestamps are included, mind you, to help you navigate this video. Also, a quick thank you to my lovely patrons and YouTube members who support, have been instrumental in helping me continue to make content, especially since I started doing this full-time at the start of the year, which was the last time I was in paid employment. And a special shout out to Lina and Holly for their extra support. You get all the hearts and kisses too. Mwah. If you too would like to support me on Patreon or become a YouTube member to enjoy certain perks, even get a shout out, the link to do so is in the description bar. And with that said, How I Met Your Mother Season 3 Episode 5, titled How I Met Everyone Else, begins with Ted talking about his new girlfriend, who as always he's starting to fall for, but whose name he has zero recollections of, and so he just refers to her as blah blah. At first I was like, excuse you, Ted Mosby, how can you not remember the girl's name? What is the matter with you? But then I remembered that this was almost 30 years ago for him, which, to be honest, makes sense that he wouldn't remember everyone he dated back then. And most importantly, after the events of the evening played out, I would totally have scrubbed the girl's name from my mind as well, because girl, what? But sorry, I am jumping the gun. Ted introduces his new girl. We'll call her BB for short to his friends. BB goes on and on about how they first met and paints this picture of a romantic, serendipitous meeting, which I personally think is a way the writers chose to poke fun at Ted's preference of a grand meeting to indicate that the person he's with is the one. But maybe that's just the snarky part of my brain talking. Anyway, as the audience, we notice that something is not quite right with the expressions of the McLaren Five, and we then flash back to moments before BB took center stage. Ted had come clean to his friends to let them know that he met his new girlfriend online. But because she's kind of embarrassed about telling the truth of how they actually met, she's going to lie and spin a totally different first meet experience, and they should all just roll with it. Now, the others are okay with it, even though everyone reacts like it's so shocking that Ted met BB online. And I had to pause a moment to flash back to 2006, 2007. Because, like, I could have sworn meeting partners on the internet wasn't as mocked as the show made it out to be at the time, right? Like, I know Tinder doesn't show up for another 5 to 6 years after the point, but Facebook was taken off at this era, right? And people were meeting their partners in chat rooms. So I was a bit confused by the gang's reaction. Or is it just me, y'all? Am I misremembering how dating was in the mid to late 2000s? Anyway, everyone laughs. Barney is convinced that BB's desperation to not have anyone know the truth of how she and Ted first met must mean that she's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And my mind immediately flashed to the Swally episode, because if there's anything How I Met Your Mother is quite adept at, it's having circumstances arise that force these designated crazy women to act out in ways that justifies the gang's initial assessment of them. And sure enough, like Ted had predicted, BB shows up and lies about their first meeting and goes on for quite some time until the truth comes out that Ted had told his friends how they had actually met. An admission that upsets BB, and to calm her down, Ted encourages everyone to share stories of how they all met. We get the saccharine sweet first meeting of Lily needing help with a stereo installation and making it to Marshall's room, where it was love at first sight for the both of them, which, not going to lie, made me smile. And then I cackled when we learned that there was a healthy sprinkling of lust too on Marsha's part. We also get informed of the story of how Ted met Barney. Ted was at the urinals with the most atrocious beard and haircut, like absolutely the worst. Doesn't do shit for him, not going to lie. Anyway, Barney comes in and feeds him some line about his deaf brother, and when Ted buys it, Barney considers the line a success and decides to use it on one of the girls he's got his eyes on in the bar. After Ted leaves the urinal and takes his seat at the bar, he's joined by Barney, uninvited, who advises him to lose the beard, get a suit, and he follows it by basically strong-arming Ted into being his friend, which, not going to lie, I'd always assumed that was how Barney and Ted became friends, with quite the strong arming from Barney. Like, we all know Barney. Anyway, the girl approaches and Barney feeds her the line about his brother, who immediately points to as Ted being deaf. The girl, who is fluent in sign language, signs out her greetings to Ted, and to Barney's surprise, Ted signs back to her and asks her to give his brother her number. Barney is quite impressed, and even though things didn't quite work out as he had hoped because the girl had given him a fake number, it was a good way for him to see that Ted would be quite the wingman for him. Of course, this is when in present day, or rather at the meeting with BB and everybody else, Ted admits that, well, things played out quite differently, because what he had actually done was sign to the girl to tell her that Barney was lying to her, and he had advised her to give Barney her wrong number instead. Which, side note, and I know the comments were pretty divided in last week's video about why I thought Ted was worse than Barney, but this episode still kind of confirms things for me, because what does it say about Ted? That he knows Barney is absolute garbage, and not only is he still friends with him, but he also occasionally acts as his wingman too. Especially when set against Barney, he always comes out as the good guy, the better guy, the guy the women should choose instead of horrible Barney. I mean, the writing is quite there. That is why nice guys TM are so dangerous, because they leave the terrible guys to act as they will so that they get propped up as being the better option without actually ever doing or speaking up to put an end to the terrible guys' act, because it benefits them. But you know what? This video is meant to be focused on Marshall and not Ted. I will go deeper into my thoughts on that part of Ted and Barney's relationship much later. Maybe when I'm all done with the show and I'm doing my Ted Mosby deep dives. I think I would do deep dives for all the characters. Let's see. But back to the episode. We are then informed of how Barney met Marshall, which of course centered around Barney being Barney, trying to teach Marshall how to pick up women, because he had heard that Marshall had only been with one woman since college, and he felt that Marshall was missing out because there is no way that the girl of Marshall's dreams was a 10. Matter of fact, he was sure she couldn't compare to Lily, who had just walked into the bar. Because remember, at this point, Barney had never met Marshall or Lily. And so when Marshall chuckles with Ted at Barney not knowing shit and goes on to kiss his girlfriend, who Barney thinks is meeting for the first time, Barney basically treats Marshall like this great teacher for a full week, wanting to learn his ways. And I laughed so hard at that. God, he's such an idiot. Oh, and there's the bit of how Ted met Marshall, where Marshall has been smoking weed and thought for a moment that Ted was the dean of students because, you know, Marshall's brain cells were non-existent at this point. His dumbass never really realized the truth until he walks in on Ted smoking the same weed, or rather eating the same sandwich, later that evening, and the two just clicked. Now, whilst all of this is going on, however, Bibi keeps giving Robin attitude because it is clear she thinks Robin is gorgeous, which Robin is, and things escalate even more for Bibi when she learns that Robin and Ted used to date. Bibi's reactions all kind of lean into the maybe she's crazy theory of Barney, and this all gets so much worse when Ted, unprompted, mind you, decides to open his big ass mouth and tell her the true secret to Lily and Marshall's first meeting. You see, the night before Lily met Marshall, he had run into her at the orientation meeting, and whilst Marshall was doing a keg stand, Ted was being a pretentious asshole, sipping wine and chatting up Lily, after which they make out quite heavily. The next morning, she finds her way to the apartment, but Ted is convinced that the reason why that happened was because amidst their drunken makeout session, he had given Lily his room number, and he believes that that is what her subconscious remembered that had her coming to his and Marshall's room that morning. But Marshall was the one that opened the door, and the rest, as they say, is history. Bibi considers this prime chaos material, however, and decides to make it a very present reality by forcing Ted to voice out first to Lily that he had kissed her at orientation before she got with Marshall. Lily is horrified, and they inform Marshall of the truth, who reminds them that he might have been doing cake stands at the orientation night, but he did notice what was going on, and he is 100% sure that Ted and Lily didn't make out with each other and instead made out with other students. Lily is delighted at this, and Ted, in a voiceover to his kids, says that he accepted this information as a friend in order to not rock the boat, but he was still certain that Lily was the girl he had made out with, at least until their 20th college graduation reunion with Marshall and the most atrocious wig of all. What the hell is that wig? Anyway, at the reunion, Ted runs into the girl he had actually made out with, who confirms what Marshall had always known, but which up until that point, Ted had never believed. Afterwards, Ted, Lily, and Marshall share a joint at the reunion, and whilst flying as high as a kite, Ted asks where his wife is. The end. And of course, there's the bit where Bibi gets tired of the many girls that Ted has seemingly been with and storms off in a jealous huff, breaking up their relationship, and we find out that she and Ted had met on the WoW servers, that's the World of Warcraft, which I know the gang were laughing at, but my gamer heart thought it was pretty cool. Episode 6, meanwhile, things are a bit on a not so crazy bend. Marshall has finally gotten his dream job with the NRDC, and whilst he's stoked about finally walking the path of an environmental conservationist lawyer, he has one interview left at a prestigious law firm that his father had secured for him. Marshall is enthralled by this because he considers all the clients this firm represents as being absolutely vile, horrendous people, and he doesn't want to have anything to do with them. But Lily encourages him to go anyway, and Marshall decides that he will do just that so he can take the opportunity to tell the evil law firm where they can stick their offer. Except when he gets there, it's to meet Jefferson Coatsworth, played by a charming John Cho. I'm not going to lie, his energy in the episode just brought me back to the Charmed episode where he needed Piper's help to have his mother find his body so she could properly bury him to keep his soul from being dragged to the underworld. Like, quick question. For those who watch the show in real time, that is How I Met Your Mother in real time, when you saw John Cho in the episode, which show or movie did you immediately flash to with his face on it? Because I thought of Charm before I thought of American Pie. And I'm just curious. Please let me know in the comments. Anyway, Jefferson is charming and quite effective at seducing Marshall over to his side of the divide, which is so funny when we flash to the future and find out that he, being Jefferson, really is as vile and manipulative as the client he represents. Also, Barney immediately clocks what he's doing too, because he too has been a Jefferson in his interactions with the women he wants to get into his bed. But Marshall doesn't think that is what is happening though. However, he was invited to come eat at a fancy, expensive restaurant, and Lily urges him to go after all. Him going to dinner is not the same as him taking the job offer. Except Marshall does get carried away at the dinner and ends up not just agreeing to Jefferson's offer to work at his firm, but also spends the night at Jefferson's too. Marshall, my dear gullible baby. The next morning, he makes the walk of shame home, ashamed that he didn't resist and actually agreed to work for such an evil firm. And after asking his friends and his wife what he should do, Lily advises him to take the NRDC up on the offer, and Marshall heads outside to call Jefferson to inform him that he's changed his mind and wouldn't be joining his law firm after all. Except Jefferson is one persistent motherfucker and was already outside waiting for Marshall. He then invites him to join him at an amusement park, and when Marshall is right in the height of the experience and having a great time, Jefferson promises him that the amusement park would be Marshall's only client. Marshall, figuring out that it's an amusement park, they can't be the bad guys, right? Of course not. He says yes. Poor naive soul, and we flash to the future to several newspaper clippings about infractions and even a death on the premises due to negligence, and we know that Marshall is about to have a very terrible time representing that amusement park. And of course, whilst all of this is happening with Marshall, the episode gives us a glimpse into how Lily's always managed to look chic and expensive and put together on a public school teacher's salary, and we learn that she does so by amassing a ginormous amount of credit card debt that she hasn't told Marshall about at all, which is why she was subtly nudging him to take up Jefferson's offer. And even after she advises Marshall to go to the NRDC instead, and she tells Robin that she would handle a mess on her own, she still doesn't tell Marshall the truth of what is happening. And I personally think that is a disaster waiting to happen, which I will get into shortly. Oh, the episode also had the subplot of Ted Mosby, the porn star, being someone that Ted Mosby, architect, had saved, who then basically stole Ted Mosby, the architect's identity, to act in porn to offer all that X-rated fame and glory as his way of saying thank you to Ted. Yep, Ted's life legit is bonkers, because what? Now, I'm pretty sure if you're a fan of Marshall and you remember these two episodes, you can probably see why I am of the opinion that Marshall Eriksen deserves so much better. And yet, due to How I Met Your Mother's insistent need on not having any of these characters be clearly in the wrong, and so they always have some sort of wiggle room to wiggle their way out. Yes, even Barney's sex pest ass, because I don't think it's a coincidence, like I mentioned in my previous video, that they always have circumstances outside of Barney's control to keep him from taking advantage on inebriated women on screen. It feels deliberate to me. They're like, Barney is an asshole, yes, but we are going to ensure that he never crosses this particular boundary on screen. You can imagine that it does so off screen, but on screen, we're going to be innocent because of network issues. Like, I can't be the only one that thinks that, right? But as I was saying, because the show always makes it a point of call to have these characters not be fully in the wrong, to give them little bits of redemption, which tend to have us forgive a ton of indiscretions and infractions that they toss our way. We never really get to address these issues. In season 1, episode 16, titled Cupcake, the show starts to lay the groundwork of Lily accruing debt that she alone cannot sort out due to her finances, which in turn means that Marshall has to step in to help offset that debt because he loves her and is planning a future with her. Like, I'm not about to make the claim that Lily doesn't love Marshall. We can see within the show that she does, completely, wholeheartedly. But being in love with someone doesn't mean that your choices and actions and the things that you make the conscious effort to keep hidden from them would not come back around to hurt them in the long run. And because Marshall is the type of person who does go all in and wants to help the people he cares about, particularly his wife, we know that all this is doing is setting up a stage where, should circumstances go a certain way, Marshall might still have to step in to help in some way. Not because he's being forced to, but because he loves Lily. And that is something that you do for those you love. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, the Cupcake episode is a very clear example of this. Lily goes shopping for a wedding dress with Robin and Victoria and accidentally sits on the cake that Victoria had baked and follows it up by accidentally tearing up the dress, which then meant that Serena van der Woodsen's grandmother, Lily Rose, has to bill Lily Aldrin for the damaged dress. And it is this turn of events that led to Marshall letting go of the unpaid internship position he had gotten at the NRDC and instead chose to work at Barney's corporate law department so he can raise enough money to pay off that particular debt on Lily's behalf. Which she then follows up 6 episodes later by breaking up with Marshall and taking off to San Francisco, leaving him with that debt. I like to occasionally imagine what Marshall's thoughts were following that. Whilst he was in the midst of calling their family and friends and people he probably doesn't know to let them know that the wedding has been cancelled, how did he feel when the bill came every month for the wedding dress that he had to help pay off? Like, did it make him furious? Sad? Pissed at himself for giving up his dream internship to pay off a debt that he shouldn't have been saddled with? I bring this up because when you love someone, when they are everything to you, you try and step up when they are faced with issues because it's your desire to help share that burden with them. It's what we do for those we love. However, even if that were the case, I do think that making your partner be aware of what your debts are so they can better plan is something you need to do as a decent person. It's you showing that you care about them enough to ensure that they have all the info necessary to be able to make an informed decision, especially when we see in the case of Lily that she legit has a shopping addiction. And whilst the episode tries to play it off for laughs, it doesn't seem like something that she's working on overcoming. Like, I hope this is just a throwaway scene in the myriad of episodes we get in the show, but I do kind of doubt it because, like I said, precedent has been set with the Cupcake episode to show that when Lily gets in over her head financially, Marshall steps in by taking on part of that burden to help her as well. And maybe I'm the only one who thought this, and I apologize for how morbid I'm about to get, but imagine for a second that Lily passes on. Like, we know that isn't going to happen because this is a comedy and Ted has already told us what the future would be for everyone in his life. Except Barney. Now that I think about it, Ted has never actually mentioned Barney once in all the mentions he's made of the episode that he does with his kids. And, yo, does Barney die? Are they out and outs? Because it can't just be that Barney doesn't like any kids. In the episode where he watches his brother get married and had that moment of panic before meeting his nephew, the minute the baby was in the picture, Barney melted. So we know he can be good with kids. So, it would be interesting to see. Maybe this is a conscious choice to have us have it at the back of our minds that there might be some sort of Armageddon in Barney and Ted's relationship that has him cutting off Barney from his life, and all of this is to have us questioning if the friendship breakup was permanent or not, because if it was mentioned in the future, then we'll know how that fractured relationship, we'll know it will fix eventually. Like, imagine if the writers were fucking with our heads to have us theorizing and everything, and that's why he's been all silent on Barney. Wanna bet that it's going to be about like a girl or something, because like it sounds like such a Ted fucking thing to do. Am I right? Damn. Anyway, sorry, I went off on a tangent. I apologize. As I was saying, let's imagine for a second that something happens and Lily passes on. If she continues on this streak of hers of acquiring debt while keeping it from her husband, and considering how much the two of them are oversharers, I will not be surprised if they decide to have a joint account or something, which if Lily is maxed out her old cards, she can always take out another credit card on that joint account. So if something happens to her, Marshall will be the one forced to pay off her debt whilst dealing with the grief of having lost her. And I know this is me reading into it because this would never happen, but I just need to point out that we have established that Lily has a shopping addiction. Even while she was telling Robin that she would handle everything, she still made purchases with the outfit she wore that day whilst debating whether to encourage her husband to sign his soul to the devil so that they can have enough money to fund her addiction and pay off her debts. Like, yes, she did the right thing ultimately and suggested Marshall take the NRDC job regardless. That was her being noble, I admit it. But I also need her to come out and tell him the truth. Marshall deserves that, damn it. And I worry that that is never going to happen. Because my mind flashed back to season 3, episode 2, where both Lily and Marshall had death folders, and in there, they were meant to write letters to each other for them to read in the case of death. For Marshall, he wrote something sentimental and was hoping to get something in that vein back, which he unfortunately did not. Now, that I can wave away, as you know, Lily not wanting to be overly sentimental in the text. And like she said, she doesn't want to think of a future where Marshall is alone. But now that I've seen episode 6, I'm just over here like, girl, why did you not mention your debt in your letter to your husband after you died? Because if she were indeed dead, what's not to say that Marshall would not be hit with all her credit card bills, even if he's not mandated to pay them for her? The fact that it's after her death that he would learn all of this information is so unfair. I mean, am I the only one who is seeing it that way? Because if you love me, if you claim to love me, the least you can do is not have me be blindsided by shit. And yet, we've seen that having Marshall be blindsided by decisions she takes is something that Lily does a lot. Because ultimately, she isn't actually thinking about Marshall in those moments. She's thinking about Lily. I mean, how else do we explain her decision to punish Ted for calling her the C word, thanks to everyone who clarified that for me, was to read the entire apartment of the Winter Wonderland that they both knew Marshall had been looking forward to because he really, really loves Christmas. How did it take Ted, not Lily deciding that as much as she hates Ted in that moment, she loves Marshall more? Nope. It took Ted leaving the apartment and New York for Lily to then put the decor back. Like, so if Ted had insisted on not going anywhere, she would have just been okay with ruining Christmas for the man she loves. Like, for real. I repeat, Marshall Eriksen deserves better. And I really do hope at some point this issue is addressed, because honestly, it's getting pretty frustrating at this point. Being considerate is being honest so your spouse isn't caught off guard by decisions you had made and debts you had built up long before you officially got together as man and wife. Like, that is the least she can do in this situation. And every moment Lily continues to stay silent is one that feels like she's playing a very dangerous game, one that stands the possibility of blowing up in her face. And then there is Ted, who, not going to lie, season 3 episode 4 had me looking at him with some sort of side eye as my brain started wondering, dude, why can you not shut the fuck up? And like, I am not just pissed about his handling of things with regards to his recollection of his first meeting with Lily. Like, I got upset right from the very start of that particular episode with him because, and a quick side note at this point, I cannot be the only one who was angry with Ted about this, right? Because like, he was very aware that BB wasn't comfortable with his friends knowing the truth of how they actually met. Rather than keep quiet and make her think that they were in alignment on them lying about their first meet to their friends, which then meant that Ted lets BB think that he's okay with it whilst going behind her back to tell his friends the truth. And you might think, come on, Noria, it's not that bad, but I beg to differ. Ted could easily have told BB right immediately that I know you aren't comfortable with others finding out the truth about how we met, but these are my friends and I don't feel comfortable lying to them. Besides, I don't think they would mind, so I will be telling them the truth. Instead, It doesn't do that. It tells his friends the truth, doesn't let her know that they know, and proceeds to let her make an absolute fool of herself when all of that could have been avoided if he had just told her the damn truth. I am not keeping this from my friends. And you know what? Now that I think about it, I wonder if the events of that evening wasn't precisely BB reacting out of anger and wanting to punish Ted for his hypocritical act. Because, like, if the reason why he couldn't keep his mouth shut about the truth of how he and BB actually met was because he tells his friends everything and doesn't think anything should be kept a secret from them, no matter how embarrassing it might be, well, then she probably figured that this secret about you believing that you had hooked up with Lily before she found her forever love with Marshall is a secret I will not allow you to keep. Two can play at this hypocritical game. And you know what? I agree with her. I think Bibi has a point. It is sad though because it is at the expense of Marshall and Lily's relationship. Well, not really at the expense of their relationship, since their marriage still held strong after the episode, but it did make things awkward between them at the time. And I still maintain that that was Bibi's goal all along, which... good game, BB, good game. But back to why I'm so upset about Ted and this mess, because it took a while for me after watching the episode and thinking about it that my brain was like, why was Ted Mosby so hung up about the fact that he might have kissed Lily first? Is this a way for us to walk away with the thought, the impression that in Ted's head, Robin isn't the one that got away, but it's actually Lily? Is this why he decided suddenly on needing to have his one the minute after Marshall and Lily got engaged and announced it? Is that what is fueling him? Not just the envy for what Marshall and Lily have, but the envy that Marshall has Lily, who would have been his first if only he had been the one who opened the door after, in his memory, he had given her his room number the previous night. Because I don't know about you, but I found his insistence on that memory, the fact that he kept it and polished it and cherished it like an egg until he spilled his guts to Bibi, someone he hadn't known for that long, mind you, and he can't even blame alcohol for his loose lips in that instance. Nope, he was stone cold sober and just felt like he needed to get it off his chest. And I don't know, the minute after we got that scene, I was left with the question of, God, is Ted jealous of Marshall? Like, jealousy is a normal human emotion and reaction to someone having something that you want, of course. The important thing is not to try and harm them or wreck them in the process, to take them out of the picture. And we know that that isn't Ted's story. Once again, he loves Marshall. But I do wonder if the show at some point will explore this further, because the entire sequence of events was given, it should have been me. If not for Marshall's tall, perfect form and winning personality, I would have been the one to get with Lily. And I don't know about you, but I find that a bit messy. Once again, Marshall Eriksen deserves so much better. But of course, these are just my thoughts. You can agree with them, disagree with them, whatever the case may be. Please share your own thoughts on this video in the comments. I apologize for the length of it, because goddamn, I yapped a lot today. Sorry. Like this video, however, if you've watched this one, I haven't done so yet, and enjoyed anything I had to say, and share it so others can find my channel as well. Or you can check out my gaming or ASMR channel if they sound like something you might be interested in. I have both of them linked in the description bar. I will see you tomorrow with a new video. Until then, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.